guys, it's Frank again. Welcome to another episode of Sticking That Bass. In our first episode, we talked about the different lures I was going to be throwing this time of year and what suggestions I had for you guys to throw. I had a couple questions about jigs, and our last episode I said I'd hit on that, so here we go. As you guys all know, there's so many different types of jigs, so many different types of companies that sell jigs. Which one's better than the other one? I don't really know. To me, whichever one catches the most fish. So whichever one catches the most fish for me is the best company. So anyway, there's casting jigs, flipping jigs, finesse jigs, swim jigs, grass jigs, punch jigs, hair jigs, bladed jigs, and the list goes on and on and on and on and on. So you just got to find out which one works best for you at that time that you are fishing. It's one of the top producers of bass throughout the whole entire season, throughout time, I guess, since they were invented. It's not a magic lure, so don't think it's like, oh, if I get a jig, Frank said get a jig. If I get this jig, it's going to work. It's not a magic lure. There's no lure that's a magic lure, because if there was one, everybody would have one. They're great in cold weather with a slow presentation. You don't want to rip it out like you would normally, like would a crankbait or a spinnerbait or anything like that. It's definitely a slow presentation lure. Most of your bites are going to happen on the fall. Actually, I think it's like maybe 70-75% of your bites that are going to come on a jig are going to be on the fall of the jig, not usually on the rise of the jig. It's going to be worked slowly across the bottom, around structure, around rock or chunk rock or riprap. There's no wrong season in which to use them. You just got to find out what type of lure that bass wants, whether it's, like I said, a swim jig or flipping jig or a hair jig. You just got to find out what type of lure that they want at that time. There's so many different types of trailers. There's grubs, there's swim baits, there's craws, there's salamanders, there's lizards. There's just so many different types. There's pork trailers, which is something that I normally throw actually during the winter. It has a little bit slower presentation, and I'll show you what one of those looks like as well. Without further ado, let's get into it. So we're going to start off with our swim jig. With a swim jig, it's a little bit different. You can see it. Head's a little bit pointed. It has a brush guard on this one. I just got through cutting this one. I'm going to show you guys how I normally cut my most of my jigs. Sometimes to make a little bit smaller profile. Usually when these skirts come on, they're a little bit long. They usually look like about like this, and you can tell the difference between this one and this one, how much I cut off that one. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that one real fast. What I normally do is I grab my skirt right here, just like this, just right below that hook. I usually pinch about right there, and that's normally how much I cut off. I cut that right off just like that. Some guys cut it in to where you're actually cutting into the lure like this to get some of them long and some of them short, which isn't a bad idea. I do that sometimes as well, and I didn't get enough off of that one. Just cut that right off of there. Try not to cut your finger, guys. Try not to cut your finger. Don't want to go to the hospital. So that is what the cut swim jig looks like, and most of the jigs that I throw, that's what they end up looking like. And like I said, that's a swim jig. This one happens to come with, both of these actually come with rattles, and it also has a little hook back there that'll hold your trailer on, and I'll show you how to put those on in a minute. And then we have our football head jigs. Got blue and black, of course, guys. I always have blue and black. And I got a pumpkin colored one already with a trailer on there. And this one was long too, and I cut it down as well. So what you're going to use a football head on, but you're going to use it on riprap or chunk rock or whatever, and you're going to let that jig hit, and you're going to let it swim. It's supposed to mimic a lizard or a crawdad, or something moving slowly across the bottom, So once you pull it up and it gets out of that rock and it hits down to the next rock or chunk rock or riprap or pea gravel, just let it sit there for a minute and then move it. You don't have to keep constantly moving this lure. You want a fish to inspect it and look at it and see what it's going on, and hopefully bite it. And that's how you would normally use a football head. And sorry, I forgot to tell you, but with a swim jig, it's just what it says. The swim jig is just what it says. It's a swimming jig. It is not a jig that to be used the same as a flipping jig or a brush jig or a grass jig or a punch jig. You know, it is almost to be used as like a bladed jig or a chatterbait or a spinner bait, you know, or a swim bait. That's what you're going to use a swim jig for. So you're going to take this and you're going to swim this along. You can let it fall. You can let it hit the bottom, but swim it back up, guys. Swim that lure right back up. And depending on what size trailer you have and what your trailer looks like, that's what's going to make these rattles actually move. And even with you pulling up your lure, it's going to make it shake a little bit. But you want to get a big enough trailer with big enough claws to make these rattles stand out and make the fish key in on that. So that would be your swim jig and your football head jig. Then move into a finesse jig, or not finesse jig, a flipping jig. You can tell the difference in that one and the difference in the football head. So you got your football head and your flipping jig. And I like to use these around docks as well because I personally can skip these really well, and especially if it has a flatter side like that, you know. So you can definitely tell the difference in those jigs and when I'm skipping these across docks. So this would be my my flipping jig, and I would flip this into anywhere there's laydowns like trees or brush or you know, sunken Christmas trees and stuff like that. And what this lure is designed to do is that when it goes down and it sinks down in there, what it's designed to do is to come back up through those trees, because that's why it has that pointed head. Come back up through those trees and hopefully get your lure back, and along with the fish that's going to be attached to it, right? And that would be your flipping jig. And then if you want a smaller profile, you can go to a finesse jig. You can tell the difference between a finesse jig, a flipping jig, and a football head jig, also a swim jig. Head's almost kind of the same. This head's usually round, not all of them are round. You can have a football head finesse jig, you can have a ball head finesse jig, you know, but it's usually a smaller profile. And I do the same thing with this one. I cut the skirt down to make it a smaller profile. And like I said before, a light jig will most times outproduce a heavier jig after a cold front. You know, if you're throwing this big wonkin' jig right here and you're not getting any bites, try a smaller finesse jig. Try that. Like I said, there's so many different types of jigs. There's a shaky head jig, and this one's on a weighted hook. There's so many different style weighted hooks that you can throw. This one's designed that it has a flat triangular surface with a flat side on one side. And it's designed that when it hits, it's just going to stand up like that. And this is a 16th ounce jig head. And what you're going to do is you're just going to wiggle your rod tip. You know, you're not trying to bounce this bait all the way back to the boat. You know, you want to wiggle your rod tip and then move it just a little bit. But I've learned through fishing finesse jigs that a lot of times no movement is the best movement that you can have for a shaky head jig. So you're going to barely kind of move that along, barely just kind of shake your rod tip, get that thing going, and get a reaction bite from one of those bass. And then you have your ball head jig, and you can add, you know, whatever kind of trailer you want, whether it's a crawl, whether it's a salamander, whether it's a shaky head, whether it's a brush hog. I mean, you can use this, a very versatile bait. I use this one a lot if I'm, you know, around pea gravel or around a little bit of riprap, you know, sometimes chunk rock. But that's a great jig head right there. And then you have like your small, like I said, small little finesse jig. This one's happens to be a football head again. Has a brush guard on it. I don't know if you can see that. That's a brush guard right there. And that would be your football head. And then you also have, well, I also have a swimming jig head. So you can see that. Here's your swim jig. And here's your swimming jig head. And you can add a swim jig just like this. I usually get the tail facing outwards, and it has, put that right in the middle, put it right up there, and come right out the back of it. and then slide that right up to your jig head. You know, and sometimes I'll add just a little touch of super glue right there, and sometimes I'll actually just kind of trim right around here, you know, make it so that water disperses right against that tail and makes that tail just dance in the water. So with a swim jig, you can swim it along, you can stop it, let it fall, swim it along, stop it, or you can just swim it at a steady pace, you know, going through the water. And that is a swim jig with a swim jig head. With our finesse, or with our swimming jig, like I said before, I add a trailer to just about everything I use. And this just happens to be a pocket crawl, and we'll just use this one for now. I'm going to slide this on here right to the bend of this hook, just right to there. And then I'm going to come right back out. I'm going to lift up my little my holder here. Push that all the way up. Push that in there. And there is your swim jig with a trailer. And like I said, if you can find yourself one with bigger claws, or you know, sometimes they have like a little ball on it to make it wiggle even a little bit more, and that's what's going to make these shake. So that's what's going to make that noise. That's what those bass are going to key on. And you're like, oh, what's that? And boom, there you go. There's your swim jig with a trailer. You know, and that's just with a crawl trailer. And you can also add, and I know this doesn't match, guys, you can also add a swim bait with it. You can also add a swim bait with it as well. And you just put it on the same way, thread it through. I'll thread this one real fast. Thread it through, come out the back of it. Pull up this little hook right here. Get it really embedded in there. And there you go, there's your swim bait, or your swim jig with a swimming bait on it. So, and that's what's going to make that tail wag. And that will also make those rattles go. So that would be that one. And like I said, you know, I always add a trailer to everything, and I would do the same for my flipping jig. So I would add another trailer to this one. It's green pumpkin, so I'm just going to add a green pumpkin trailer to it. Slide that up, same way. Just going to slide that up just like that. Make that bend and pull that on around. And there is your flipping jig with a trailer on it as well. Now, as I said before, you know, with all these, you know, different types of trailers, one of the trailers that a lot of people use during the winter, like I use during the winter, is actually a pork trailer. And the reason I use a pork trailer is because it actually slows the fall of the bait that you're using. And it looks just like this. It's wet, you know, and I'll usually use a chunk. This one just happens to have little curly legs, and you're going to add that. It has a leather side and a pork side. Put the leather side on first, and slip that right in. Let me get this one. I will slip this. Some of them come with a hole, and if they don't, you just add a hole. You just slip that right through that little hole, right on there, just like that. Okay? And if you get one that has the bigger chunk, that's the one that you want. It's just going to be smaller legs that are actually cut off and a lot thicker. Okay? And like I said, I will use those during the winter. Now, if you've used a pork trailer before, you know that if it's not, and it's hot out, you know if thing's not in the water, it's going to dry out, and it will dry out quick. So, if you're using it during the summer, make sure that thing, if you're not using it, make sure you put it back into its container, and then you should be good to go. And like I said before, most of my things that I tie on, I usually tie on with a Palomar knot. I'm going to show you real fast how I tie mine on. Everybody ties them on different. What you're going to do is you're going to go through your hole one time. I can let that go through there. I'm right-handed, so I'm trying to do this backwards. And then I'm going to go back through the same hole that I came through, back to the same eye. Oh. There you go. I've never done this before. Go back to the same eye, and there you go, that's what you want to look. And then what I do is I take my two fingers and I wrap this around my two fingers and hold this loop up here with these two fingers. Now all I have to do is reach through this hole, or reach through this loop, and grab this loop. And then it should just be like you're tying a shoe right there on the top. And then you're going to take this loop and grab the lure. Once you grab this lure, your knot is tied. And now all you have to do is pull your leader that's going to your rod. And just pull that down. Get it nice and snug. Add a little bit of spit, add a little bit of water. And there is your Palomar knot. And that's the knot that I tie 90% of the time, unless, you know, it warrants for something else. Now, with these lures that I use on my jigs, I'm going to use no less than 12-pound test, no less than 12-pound test on each one of these lures that I tie, on each one, unless I'm throwing a smaller finesse or a smaller shaky head type lure. And on these, I'm going to use no less or no more than 8-pound test. No more than 8-pound test on my smaller shaky head, my smaller finesse jig heads. But no less than 12-pound, I'll go up to at least 20 pounds. And if I'm in heavy cover, that's the only time that I personally tie on braid. Because I'm not real good with it, but it's the only time that I tie on braid. I like a heavier line when I fish. So if I'm in some deep cover, I will definitely throw on like a 30-40 pound braid on that, you know, just to make sure I get my lure back with the fish. So those are the ones I'm going to be using this year, guys. Hopefully that's helped you out. If you have any questions or comments or anything, just ask me, and like I said, I'll try to answer them the best I can. Don't forget to subscribe, tell your friends, and
rock me, mama, like a wagon wheel. Rock me, mama, any way you feel.